Hey up folks, I'm Guy Kestivan the Tester Man, and this is the Whyte T-140 RS, mid-travel, meat-powered mountain bike from the well-established UK manufacturer. So I took an inordinately long time to do the live ride review, so that's where all the ride feedback and kind of comparisons to other bikes are living at the moment. This is going to be a quick tech check through on geometry, frame features, spec, and how this bike compares to others in its price range and others within the Whyte range as well. So I'm going to come over there, grab the camera, let's get up close with what's Whyte and what's Wong about this brand new bike. Right, so T140, alloy frame, but you've got fairly smooth welds on there, and those kind of flowing organic hydroform lines. You wouldn't immediately assume it wasn't carbon. You've actually got some nice moulded detail there, like a little sort of ridge line running down the side of the down tube there. I don't know if it has a massive structural purpose. It might be a stiffening member, but it certainly looks nice. What I really appreciate is the fact that they've tidied up this area. Older bikes used to have a pipe running across there, so you've got quite a tall extension on it, and you've still got a gusset welded in there, but the overall look is much neater the way you've got that path now all the way from head tube down to seat stays. And as you can see, relatively slim tubing up front, nice, neat, into the frame cable routing with decent weather protection on it. Nothing nasty or suspect going on with the headset, all nice and conventional up there. And then, like I say, slim down there. And then you've got some proper chunky sections on the rear here, particularly those upper stays there. And then this massive welded link here that drives the shock. And then fairly sizable chainstay link there. And that, again, that's proper agricultural. It's not, I mean, don't mean agricultural in the sense it's not finished very nicely. I mean, that's a big old piece there. That's a locomotive scale piece of work there. And then even across here, you've got this super broad main pivot there. And you've got to remember that Whyte were one of the first brands to commit to what they called SCR. So single chainring ready bikes. It's when most people were still using a frame with a front mech mount on it, which not only looked less tidy, but also mean you couldn't really open that back end up for maximum tyre clearance on there. Whereas obviously now you've got that potential to put this curving tube in there. Still relatively tall. It's 450mm, this seat post on this large, so not super slammed, but that white dropper post that's in there, I call it a drop it post, it's very, very similar to the P&W Rainer post, because it's basically got a little plastic key in there, which you unscrew the collar, change the key, and you can see it's got -30 through to 0. So it's travel adjustable. I think this is 170mm stroke on the large and extra large bikes, but obviously you can chop it down to 140mm stroke if you just want a long bike, but you don't want the saddle to come up as far because you've got a relatively low saddle height. Moving back to other features, you can see you've got these white, very proudly logoed pivot caps on there, and the main feature in terms of longevity for Whytes, for as long as I can remember, is the fact that you've got lifetime warranties on those bearings. So that's not that I say that they won't wear out, but when they do, eventually, Whyte will just send you a new set of bearings free of charge. And again, you've got what you call clevis joint, so it's double-sided, it's a fork joint there for extra stiffness. See big old pockets machined back there, but that's a fairly chunky piece of aluminium still. And then clevis joint down on this FSR pivot, horse link pivot, whatever you want to call it. It's a true 4-bar suspension link, rather than having the pivot on the seat stay there. It's on the chainstay ahead of the rear axle, so that gives them some degree of tuning in how that axle path and therefore the rest of the suspension kinematic works. It's not just a simple arc. And this is a system that Whyte have been using for absolutely ages now. It's common across all their bikes, and they've got it absolutely dialed in. And actually a lot of the original T140, because there's been had a delay coming out, was first sort of developed in lockdown really, and it was actually used as the test bed for a lot of the development work on Whyte's mid-travel full suspension e-bikes, which I guess is why you've got a fairly chunky back end on it. And also, it was ridden by Sam Shocksmith, who's a very, very talented designer and enduro rider, but he is an absolute beast on the bike. So that needs to be a properly rock-solid rear end to survive Sam winning several enduro races on the original T-140. But it's great to see it's finally... I mean, there is a lower price model, which I'll talk about later, because I think that's the real gem of this two-bike range, but it's a shared frame across both bikes. Major update over the last bike is you've got a UDH hanger on there. This is the current SRAM GX cable operated system, so that's a standard hanger on there. I can't really say anything more on that subject for a couple more weeks, but yeah, SRAM GX throughout on this bike, and then SRAM G2, so what used to be basically the guide brake in its fairly simple R version. You've just got reach adjust on it there in terms of braking, and it's the standard rotors. It's not the extra powerful HS2 rotors there. So, you know, reasonable, nothing amazing in terms of the gearing. You know, you do get proper 1275 standard rear cassette, so it is a 1052 block, and it does use an XD driver, but it's a good workaholic, I guess, kind of SLX XT spec SRAM group set there, and the brakes are okay. I'm not going to tell you they're amazing, they're just okay. They're pretty reliable. They're not going to have you over the bars with unexpected bite, but decent feel compared to something a bit more basic like a TRP slate. Then you've got Whyte's own bar, you've got Whyte's own stem, you've got Whyte's own grips, which are actually particularly nice grip. But the real detail, where Whyte really shine for a UK rider at least, is not only have you got nicely sealed cable routing on there, but you've got little touches like, you know, a really good collar now around the seat post. Thank God they've got rid of that internal seat wedge system they used to run, but you've still got a really nice sealed system so that covers up the slots where the seat post, where the seat tube is split, where water would get in otherwise. And again, you've got really good armouring on the chainstay there, and a little bit of a belly panel there on that, what is, again, you know, quite a slim down tube. And obviously, because it's slim and triangular in shape, there's room for a bottle cage. You know, you'll get a big old bottle in there, but there's no accessory mount up there, and there's definitely no internal storage on this bike either. And then just to finish off the spec, you've got Whyte saddle, you've got race face rims on Whyte branded hubs with DT Champion single butted spokes, so sturdy rather than super light. I mean, the rims are okay, they're relatively light, but you know, plain gauge spokes aren't light, and the hubs are, I've just said they're generic hubs, they're okay, but you know, keep an eye on them. You can expect to replace the bearings on those fairly soon, so obviously I'd recommend you upgrade them with enduro bearings, hub bearings, because they sponsor the channel, and they'll make those wheels last a lot longer. But the real standout in terms of spec, which I think is going to draw a lot of people to this bike, is the fact you get Fox Performance Elite fork and rear shock. So in terms of the fork, oh, I've stood on the creaky bit of the floor, sorry. That means you get the full grip 2 damper with high and low speed adjustment on there on the compression, and then go down to the foot of the fork there. You've got high and low speed adjustment on the rebound as well. So real tweakers fork that. In terms of setup, go lower. I mean, it has got pressure printed on it, but I'd go lower than recommended on the pressure to start with, and because it's a fork that very much sits on its damper. It's a very good damper, very sophisticated damper, really consistent. A little bit noisy compared to RockShox, but really, really good ride. But you'll need to drop the spring pressure away to really let that damper do its work. And then on the rear, again, you've got 3-position gate on the shock for your low speed sort of fine tuning in open mode, but you've also got 3-position main low-speed compression lever between open, firm and pedal, whichever way it is around, and then you've got rebound on there as well. The one thing I would say is that while that's a fork that's quite well damped, needs running lower pressure, and will naturally kind of sit in the mid of its travel, very supportive, quite an aggressive fork in terms of damping, it's only the 34 chassis. So it structurally, certainly 140mm of travel, it is a little bit flexy, certainly flexier than something like the RockShox Pike with the 35mm legs. So you kind of are just structurally, you are getting to the further edge of the control of that fork in terms of steering and sort of braking stiffness, especially as you've got a big old minion DHF there in 3C Max Compound Terra in the 29 by 2.5. There's a lot of rubber twisting that fork about, and you can feel that sometimes, especially as you have got this relatively slim mainframe, particularly the down tube, which again gives it a nice, I mean, it's a very grippy, compliant front end, but it's not as rock solid and planted and feel as that back end. And we'll go into a little bit more about the geometry and the dimensions as well, which play into that also. And then on the back, in contrast, you've got a shock that naturally blows through its mid-stroke. It's quite a open mid-stroke on it, so I ended up running a lot of pressure in there and adding a fair amount of compression damping as well. Most of the time I was actually running it in the firm mode, which is what should be a pedal mode, but for terms of support in turns, more groomed terrain, you know, berms, that kind of thing, a bit more parky stuff, I definitely put it into that firm mode, and also a lot of the time for pedaling. And then you've got the option to run it open to really maximize that grip. In that mode, super plush, super supple, because you've got this big yoke, meaning that the alignment of the rear end is very, very good, and you've got the big bearings, everything's very, very smooth. You know, it's a very, very free-flowing rear end, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of anti-squat in that rear suspension setup either. So it's a very plush, very comfortable bike, fully open. So if you're feeling more aggressive, I'd definitely put more damping into that rear shocks. There is a bit of balance, although theoretically they are matched collar and cuffs, Performance Elite, and perform at both ends. The actual feel of them isn't that balanced straight out the box. And then we need to talk about geometry as well. So we've got a relatively short rear end and a very stiff rear end, so 435mm, chunky as all hell. And then on the front, 483mm reach on this large frame. And then bottom bracket height as standard, 338mm. I've already mentioned seat tube is 450. So again, really good all round. Oh, sorry. Seat tube length is 450, and then seat tube angle 76 degrees effective, and then head tube angle 65.3 degrees effective. So kind of, I mean, they're just common numbers now. You know, that used to be really radical for a trail bike in this 140 fork category. But now they're kind of what I'd expect from most manufacturers. You know, again, Whyte were one of the first brands to get there with the whole longer top tube, shorter stem setup and short offset forks, and also relatively short rear ends and their single chainring. You know, they're a really innovative company in their past, but it's tricky to know where they're going to go, really. They're still doing innovative things with their e-bikes. They've launched one the other week, the Kado, it's called. So they're doing very innovative things with those in terms of motor placement and stuff like that. But in a way, they've run out of room to maneuver because everybody else has caught them up. But still, things like, you know, the extra sealing and the lifetime warranty bearings still make them stand out, even if the geometry has now been kind of copied by a lot of other people. And as in common with a lot of bikes, you now have a 2-position on the rear shock So by removing that bolt, it's a bit of a faff because obviously there's not much clearance to get the Allen key in there. So you have to drop the front shock out and then sort of twist it around. You can do it trail side, but it's a few minutes job. And that drops the BB height to a properly slammed 330mm. Obviously slackens the angles up a bit. So the C angle goes back to about 75.5, which is a little bit slack for steep climbing. But then the head tube goes back to 64.7. And you lose a little bit of reach as well. So it's definitely a more gravity-focused ride, and it definitely feels like it's really, really hugging the turns. Properly grounded, turns it into a right little ripper. And then you've got the option if you wanted to put a mullet rear end in. So it comes standard with 29 both ends, but if you want to put a 27.5 in the rear end, then with that chip in high position and a 27.5 rear wheel in, that mimics this bike with a 29-inch rear wheel in, but in the low position, if that makes sense. So you've got a bit, basically, not a massive amount of geometry just, but just enough to sort of cope with different wheel sizes and to give you either a kind of, again, fairly aggressively angled trail bike or a properly slammed little sort of dirty Grom park bike. If you have more deviant habits when it comes to ripping up turns and slash and burning through your local woods. And one thing I should have mentioned at the start, I did mention at the start on the live ride video, but it's not actually 140mm travel. It is at the fork, but the rear, Whyte say 135mm, I've measured it closer to 132mm, so it's a little bit of a white lie, shall we say, but it's very much a bike in that mid-travel, harder hitting category. Sits alongside bikes like the Canyon Spectral and the Merida 140, although it is slightly shorter travel than both of those. And again, it's got that 34 fork rather than the 36 fork, which means it's a little bit less convincing up front. And weight at 15.5 kilos. Again, surprisingly, if you actually look at the weights of some of the carbon bikes in this category, like that Merida, like that Canyon, that kind of plays out about the same. I think this is 15.6. They're a little bit less than that, like 15.3, 15.4, 15.3. I should go back and look it up, but I probably won't. But I'm pretty sure it's around that ballpark. So you're not actually missing out massively in terms of weight. It's a chunk, but so will anything else you buy in this price range. However, it's interesting that it's also the same weight as the Caliber Boss Nut and the Voodoo Conzo that I tested recently. So, it seems to be that alloy bikes or even, lower price carbon bikes all come in at a similar weight these days. So if you're looking for a lightweight, fast blasting cross-country bike, although in firm mode this pedals handily enough, you've got a dissector on the rear for slightly faster rolling, this is not really a bike for you. It's a good solid sturdy tough all day in daily driver trail bike designed to survive the worst of the British conditions. And in terms of a bike equipped with top-of-the-range Fox, it's actually really, really good value when you compare it to something like the Specialized Stump Jumper Comp alloy, which gets a rhythm fork and then just a performance shock on the rear, and that gets TRP brakes. It's actually, I think that's 3,750 quid, and this is 3,000 quid. So I think the major enemy for this bike in terms of selling is the fact that Whyte do a T140 RS, which is obviously same frame, same geometry, same weatherproofing features, same tyres even, but it comes with Shimano Dior gears, a Whyte own branded, but still, separate Spider, external bottom bracket chain set, WTB rims. They're pinned rather than welded, but, so they'll be a little bit heavier, potentially might split at that pin, but it's a rare thing. So, again, an okay wheel set, same adjustable seat post, same cockpit equipment. You get TRP brakes, which aren't quite as touchy-feely as the SRAMs, but significantly, while the Pike Select fork has a lot less adjustment, it's actually a stiffer fork than this 34, noticeably. And it comes, what adjustment you have is perfectly adequate. I don't think it's a fork that needs a whole ton of adjustment. And then on the back, you get the RockShox Select Plus deluxe shock, which is a really, really good shock and naturally more supportive than this Fox float. So front to rear, you've actually got a better, like this is all theoretical, but front to rear, I would say you are more likely to have a better suspension balance with that RockShox bike straight out the box. And I think they kind of just, you know, don't faff around with it, just have reliable, relatively simple equipment you can just jump on and ride vibe. It kind of suits an alloy frame trail bike more than something that's a little bit fancier. But, you know, like I said in the live ride video, if you're the kind of person who likes a good brand name to have a bit of a flex at the trailhead and you like tweaking with your dials, then by all means, this is a very good price for a Fox suspension equipped bike. And that GX is perfectly decent, although it might look a little dated in a few weeks. Which again, you know, kind of makes me wonder why they bought the bike out just now, when maybe if they waited a bit longer, because they've already been waiting 5 years to bring it out, maybe if they waited a bit longer, you would have got something that was a significant uplift compared to the Shimano Dior bike. But whichever 140 you go for, you're getting a really well sorted bike in terms of geometry, in terms of those weatherproofing features, in terms of the overall ride quality, and it's just a classic tough UK trail all-rounder, and at an excellent price too, considering you're getting it from proper independent bike shops, not just a kind of bike wholesale megastore or go outdoors, like you primarily are with brands like Voodoo, Boardman and Caliber. So that's the tech talk done on this Whyte T-140 RS. If you've not already watched the live ride review, make sure you go and watch that. It is a long one, but that's because there's a lot to talk about with this bike. I kind of didn't realise there was this much to talk about with the bike, but once you go into the details of how to best set that shock up to match these forks, and also the different ride possibilities with that switch it link, then it turned out to be quite a long riding session, but the sun was out, Stainburn was looking pretty much spot on, and hope you enjoy coming along for a ride with me on the bike, which I think is still the best way for you to get an idea of how the bike responds live on different sorts of terrain. So make sure you watch the live ride review, give this a thumbs up, like, if you wouldn't mind. Subscribe, that makes a big difference to how many people YouTube recommends these videos to. And if you're feeling really, really generous, then please consider throwing me a few quid on Patreon on a monthly basis, because obviously that is a huge help for keeping GuyCast TV flourishing in the way it is at the moment, because we're doing well, but it'd be great to continue that trajectory upwards. But for now, I've been Guy Kestevan on GuyCast TV talking about the Whyte T-140 RS. Hope you found it useful, and make sure you tune in for whatever else it is that I turn up to test, mountain bike or gravel wise, in the coming weeks.